Hi, welcome to episode 3 of the Tre-J Show. We're continuing our talk about leadership, particularly leadership within the Christian faith and within a lot of it specifically within a ministry like Tre-J. Today our special guest is Daryl Zoerman. He is the eldest leader that we have with Tre-J. He's been involved with youth ministry for probably 40-ish years. I don't know,
Close to that.
Close to that. And as you all know, my name's Andrew, and this is Dave.
Our conversations on leadership so far, we've talked to a couple of kids involved in Tre-J who've worked their way into the Tre-J leadership program and have been now in the last couple of years after graduating from high school getting into that leadership role while being in college. Last time we talked to Nick, who God used Nick in some other ways through the Tre-J board of directors and in leadership and getting involved in as directing a lot of our films and stuff now too, along with Mark. I mean, Mark's still in charge, but Nick's kind of getting into that more too, as that's what he's going to school for. This week, we want to kind of look at, I guess, a lot longer of a time frame in being involved in ministry and, leadership, ministry leadership, and especially youth ministry, because like Andrew said, I mean, Daryl's been involved in youth ministry longer than I've been alive. When we were at the same church when I was in middle school, and when I was in middle school youth group, he was one of the middle school youth leaders. That's how far back. Well, he's my uncle too, so we go way further back than that. But that's really where our connection with youth ministry started. I mean, he was the leader there, and I was a kid there in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. He was the youth leader, and to this day there's still stories we talk about, like driving in that snowstorm, and watching the car go barreling off into the ditch, trying to pass us, and Matt Yacht taking out that pole,
The brand new van.
a brand new van that was rented for the first time at that point. He backed into that pole. Yeah. I mean, what I'm saying is, being a leader, it's not just the here and now, it's what along that whole journey, and the fact that what happened 20 years ago, it's a long time, still impacts the kids and the youth, and you don't always know that and see that. I mean, of course, me and Daryl, being that we're family, know each other and keep in contact, obviously, and see each other a lot, because we work at the same place too, so I mean, I see him every time I walk into work, because his office is here now and mine is here. So, but with that said, what I want to do is turn it over to Daryl, let him talk a little bit about, I guess, 40 years worth of youth ministry and some of the things that he's learned over those years, and even where he's seen youth ministry go over those 40 years, and just succinctly in a few minutes, but he can do it. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Daryl and let him talk.
Actually, what really got me involved in youth ministry was a friend of mine was involved in the Big Brother, Big Sister program, and he kind of encouraged me to join that. And so for about 3 years, I was involved in the Big Brothers program and talking with this young boy's mother about the impact that I had, how he changed in the 3 years that I was with him, really got me to thinking about, maybe this is what God is calling me into. And so I went to Reformed Bible College, which is now Kuiper, to go to school become a youth pastor. And even while I was in school, I was involved in youth ministry by teaching a class at my church, and then I was a student pastor at a church my senior year, and then I got called to be a youth pastor in Minnesota. And that was an experience, because youth ministry has gone in the last 40 years from being a place where kids come to church just to have Bible study and then go home, it has grown into the fact that, yeah, they need the Bible study, help them to grow, but they also need to have ways to express their faith. And you need someone to walk alongside them in order to do that. And where I had a problem in the church in Minnesota was that was not the direction they wanted. They just wanted to have the youth group in church, stay in church, and that was it. No involvement in the community, no involvement anywhere else.
If I could pause for 1 minute there. I mean, again, just to broaden that a little bit to a lot, I mean, that's been a huge thing that a lot of churches dealt with over the last even 10, 15, 20 years is youth ministry has become way more complex because, I mean, even like when I was in, the youth ministry programs at the church where we were at, it was primarily Christian kids from Christian parents from that church. And even now, I mean, youth ministry has grown so much more to where there's so many more not nuclear families to, it's more, you got kids coming from tons of kids coming from broken homes. Kids coming to the youth ministry programs and things that are available to youth where the parents have no connection to the church. And yeah, there's been a lot of things going on in a lot of churches, not just the one that youth pastor. You just happen to be blessed with the fact that some of that, you were trying to get some of that transition in place and it didn't quite go, and they drew out kicking and screaming. I mean, the church where I did a lot of youth ministry work too, sometimes, there's that tug of war with that particular incident. And it's not just that, it's just the direction youth ministry's been going, and it's been a complex thing of trying to figure out how that looks and how that's going to look, because you don't just get kids with a background in the Bible anymore who have these know how to play the church game, I guess you could call it, or whatever. You got kids coming from where this is their first time stepping in a church building in 8th grade or 7th grade or 9th grade or whatever, because their friend encouraged them to come in or whatever, And their parents have no affiliation whatsoever with that church. It's a kid who comes on their own accord, and that just changes the whole dynamics of it. So.
And also, the biggest struggle with the church is keeping the kids in the church. After they get a lot of these kids, they come to church, they go through the youth group, and once out of the youth group and they graduate, you very rarely see them anymore. And the church is slowly, I think that's one of the reasons why churches are slowly getting into getting kids involved in the church process, in every aspect of the church, is to get them to have an ownership that they are part of it. Because, see, the philosophy, like when I first started going to churches, always was, well, we have to do something with the kids because they are the future of the church. Well, no, they are the future, but they are also part of the present. You can get kids to be part of the church, to use whatever gifts they got to bring other kids in. I mean, you can have someone like 5 years old bring kids into church. And that's what you got to do. You got to get these kids to say that this is my church. I am part of the church.
And how have you seen that play out over the last, 40 years you've been involved in youth ministry? Like where was it 40 years ago to where it is?
Well, 40 years ago, I think the church's idea was, they built, actually, to me, the church 40 years ago built a wall around their church because of things that were going on outside of out in the world, so they were getting scared. And so the whole philosophy is we got to protect what we have. We've got to protect the people, and we got to protect them from the outside. And, well, that's not what God called the church to do. God never called the church to be a country club like some people, but not the church is actually a living, breathing body, and the church has to grow, and in order for it to grow, it's got to reach out to the community.
So how do you see that now, I guess,
Well, I think the churches are doing more, and I think slowly, see, 40 years ago, it was a denomination thing. If you were the Christian Reformed Church, you only wanted to work with people within the Christian Reformed Church. And the Reformed Church, it was a denominational thing. But now, churches are actually starting to work together. And it always was, well, we have to build up our membership. Well, now churches are saying, well, no, our job is to go out and reach out to the people. Yeah, get them to come to our church and get them to know Christ, but if they go somewhere else, as long as they accepted Christ, and I think that's what the church's and I think that's where youth ministry is starting to go. It's not so much we got to do this to keep our kids in, but we got to teach our kids to be able to go out and to use their faith and to build up their faith so they can go out and they can stand strong and they can reach others and to build the church that way.
So I guess the final thoughts are, like I said, I was a kid in middle school when you were a leader there in that youth group. How do you see, the dynamics that existed, what would be 20 years ago to like the dynamics that exist nowadays? Like what we try to instill in Tre-J. Not necessarily this is bad and this is good. It's just, it's 20 years difference. Things are just done differently because kids are differently. Nowadays, kids are driven so much by social media and connection like that. That's why we're doing a lot of videos, and Tre-J's even get involved in what we can on social media because that's where the kids are. So like, how do you see that dynamic continuing to play out based on what we did?
Well, 20 years ago, there really was no mentoring. Bring kids into the youth group. Get them to explore their faith and get kids from the community. And we had a couple of really good youth pastors for that. And bring kids in from the community, reach out to them, and build. But the whole dynamics with Tre-J is the mentoring part, where with the youth group you had 40 some kids and 4 or 5 leaders. It is really hard to mentor to all the youth at that big group, where if we got a smaller group, we can do just that. We can find out, okay, this young man is good he's got a great imagination. Let's help him build up that imagination to write scripts. Or he's got a good eye for detail. Well, let's get him to work behind the scenes as a director. Or he can really act, and that's what we do. We try to find the kids' gifts and build that up so that they can actually be more comfortable with who they are and everything else that goes on in their life, and it gives them confidence in themselves.
Yeah. We don't want to go super long-winded. So kind of in this conversation here, I don't know if you got any insight you want to quick toss in or.
Nothing that comes to my mind. Obviously, the one thing we try to focus on with Tre-J is the idea that, youth ministry is something that's always going to be changing because the world itself is changing, and the way kids react to things are different. Even just in my lifetime, the way I was in middle school is very different than the way middle schoolers and high schoolers are today. And so we're trying to adapt, and we're trying to reach out to the kids where they're at, and that's obviously something, Daryl talked about with over his 40 years, how things are changing, and things are going to continue to change. It's always going to happen. And so as with youth ministry, we have to change and adapt with that as well. So on that note, we're going to end this episode. I'd like to thank Daryl for being here with us. As always, make sure that you like, subscribe, share this video with somebody if you think they need to know it, and we look forward to seeing your comments. If there's other topics you'd like us to talk about, if you'd like us to bring Daryl on to do a bit more in-depth conversation about, his experiences, let us know. And also look forward to in the future, we're going to be starting another kind of somewhat weekly, maybe every other week, shorter series about just faith. So look forward to that in the next few weeks here.